Hi, this is Alan Gassman. It is Thursday, January 9th. I can't believe we're this far into the new year. I'm here with my friend and my coach, David Finkel, and we're going to talk about the 10 must-follow rules to leverage your personal assistant. And I hope that you're going to use the videotape of this that we'll be able to send you, play it with your personal assistant, and come up with a lot of great ideas to save time and to make yourself more effective and to have a much better vantage point, much better leverage to do a great job for your clients and for others, as David is going to explain. Free advertisement. Please also join us on the 16th. David Howell, Larry Ribka, and Tom Love are going to talk about their concerns about equity universal life insurance and borrowing money on life insurance, premium financing. It's not all what people think it is, so please watch if you have any concerns about it. If you don't have concerns about it, then you really need to watch. January 23rd, my friend Christy Nicolo is going to talk about explaining the installment sale to a defective grantor trust. If you don't know how to do this technique to save estate taxes, you definitely want to watch it. If you're a professional and you tell me that your clients don't want to do it, watch how Chris explains it. It's much easier to convince a client to do something when it's a thorough explanation and they can clearly understand it, and we have a lot of good graphics. January 30, I'm going to talk about the biggest mistakes physicians make as owners and non-owners in medical practices. It's going to be hard to do all those in 30 minutes, but we will. And there's even more. So please join us as you can. And if you are an estate planner, join us March 26th through the 28th in Tampa with my friend Sri Kumar Rao. We're going to have a practice acceleration workshop. For more information, send me an email. I'll be glad to tell you about it. Let me tell you a little bit now about my friend David Finkel. I met David after I read an incredible book called Scale, S-C-A-L-E. It was a Wall Street Journal best-selling book and a really good book about how to make great progress in your business or your profession. I then did some speaking for David. I met a lot of his clients, and I found that a lot of his clients had really accelerated their businesses and professions after being coached by David and after having involvement with his coaching organization and seminar organization called Maui Mastermind. Seeing how everybody else did with David, I decided to make him my coach, and I've had great progress and really fantastic enjoyment of the process and of the legal practice. I think everyone who's watching this webinar probably knows that improving our legal practice is one of our big objectives and one of my big sources of pride and enjoyment. So, David, welcome, and I'm looking forward to listening to what you have to say.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate that. Those of you that don't know, Alan and I have been friends for a number of years now. I'm a client of Gassman and the law firm, and they've done phenomenal work for me, just like they probably have for a lot of you. And the enjoyment over the last 2 years with Alan as a client here of our business coaching program. So today we're going to talk about the 10 must-follow rules to leverage your personal assistant so that you make your life more fun, more profitable, more enjoyable. And we're going to deal with this one step at a time. You guys are going to love today. Today is going to make your life so much better. But we do need to start off with a little bit of reality check. Right now, I understand that every one of you who are participating in this webinar, number one, you're overworked, you're stressed, you have too much to do on your to-do list. There's no way you could get even a fraction of it done, and you feel overwhelmed. And that's the background. That's the noise that's behind the scenes. We have to acknowledge that's there. So let's work and help you to deal with that. Now, first of all, for those of you that love to read books, I just completed my last book, The Freedom Formula. It came out, oh gosh, a few months ago, and I think you're really going to love it. In chapter 2 of The Freedom Formula, we talk about how to leverage your time, and a section of it is about leveraging your personal assistant. So for those of you that have the book or are going to get the book, it starts on page 64, and you're absolutely going to love that. I would really encourage you with that. Okay, that said, there are 4 levels of a personal assistant, and we need to be clear on what they are, because the first 2 you want to avoid like the plague. The second two, that's who you're looking for. So the first level is we call the Gofer level. You're saying to the person, do this, carry that. This is the person that you have to tell them exactly what to do, how to do it, and they're basically only able to follow out rote routine tasks. Avoid this person like the plague. Second type of person is the admin. This person is capable of doing clearly defined, concrete activities and tasks, but only if they're explicitly defined, uh, assigned over to him or her. This is the person that you later on would go to and say, well, why didn't you do X? And they would say, well, you didn't ask me. They'll use no initiative whatsoever. And you're going to find in the first must follow rule in a moment, we'll talk about, you never want to hire a gopher. You never want to hire an admin as your assistant. You might want to hire a gopher if you're throwing a party and you need someone to carry trays of food around, but you do not want to hire that person thinking that they're an assistant. The executive assistant or EA is someone who's really competent. You can give them a fuzzy administrative or operational task, and they'll figure out a way to get it done. They're willing to handle a little bit of ambiguity, which is important because most of us work in an environment that we're so busy, we don't have time to clearly define everything perfectly. And so this person is able to make good decisions in an administrative function. You didn't tell her exactly what flight to get you. She's going to basically come back and say, well, David, I booked you on this airline instead of your normal one. Why? Because I was able to get a direct flight versus this one you were going to have to travel for 3 hours longer through this other airport. I know you normally like United, but I booked you on Delta or whatever that might be. The final level, the fourth level of personal assistant, we'll call this your chief of staff, or you might want to think of this as someone who really could be your XO if you're in the military, or your COO of you personally. This person basically says, look, I know what you're trying to accomplish, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do behind the scenes to help you accomplish the goals that you've set for yourself in your area of the company, or the goals that you've set yourself for in your personal life if they can help. This person can staff down work. Like, for example, this person might say, okay, I'm going to be the liaison between you, and you've assigned tasks over to the person who runs marketing or the person who runs the finance part of your company. And this person can actually follow up to make sure those things were done. They can make independent decisions that are not just about admin tasks, but actually have a really good business head on their shoulder. This person is loyal to what you're trying to accomplish. And you know what? Over time, this person sometimes is more competent than you are in getting the operational administrative tasks done. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to find a chief of staff. That's a really tough hire, but you can get an EA, an executive assistant that handles that third level. The rule number one says never hire just a gopher or an admin to be your assistant. They're going to frustrate you to no end. One of the biggest determiners is, how does this person handle ambiguity? For those of you that like doing different personality assessments, there is a personality assessment called the Kolbe, Kolbe. Alan, I know you've used that in different points. I know you use the Omni profile now, but the Kolbe is a test. It's like 60, 70 bucks to test somebody. They have 4 categories of behavior, one of which is something called their quick start. And in the Kolbe, they grade you 1 to 10 on these different ones, and 1 to 3 means you're very low on that particular item. 4 through 6 means you're middle range, and 7 through 10 means you're on the upper end of the spectrum. Now, quick start really is measuring what is a person's ability to handle ambiguity. What I've learned for me is I will never hire somebody who isn't in that middle range as my assistant. I don't want them to be a 7, 8, 9, or a 10, that upper range, because if they're looking for lots of novelty and they're not a follow through or finisher, can't have it as an assistant. But most people will look for in an assistant someone who gets stuff done. But what they won't look for is someone who can handle a little bit of fuzziness. And as a person running a company or working in a professional career, you are going to have some fuzziness, and you want the person to be able to handle that, at least in the administrative function. So this brings us to the next coaching point that I have for you, right? So you're faced with 2 doors. Door number 1 says, wow, can I really afford an assistant? And door number 2 says, can I really afford not to have an assistant? And here's the second must follow rule. You can afford an assistant. You're crazy if you think you can't. think about this for a moment. Most of you who are on here run either companies, or run a professional practice, or you are a key person inside one of those businesses. And so, for example, let's say you're an attorney or a CPA and you're billing at $400 an hour. Even if you're an assistant who you're paying $15, $20, $25 per hour, even if he or she saves you, for every 1 hour of their time saves you only 30 minutes, you're still making a 10x, 20x return on your investment. You absolutely can afford an assistant. Matter of fact, you can't afford not to have an assistant, which brings me to something I've shared with some of you who've been on some of the past webinars that I've done together with Alan, or even on some of the webinars we've done with my company, Maui Mastermind. We have something called the time value matrix. And for those of you that have the Freedom Formula book, we talk about this in detail, but it's a way to take Pareto's principle, that 80-20 rule, to its most productive extreme. So that 80-20 rule basically says, hey, 80% of what you do is very low value, D activities. These gives you 20% of your result. But 20% of what you do gives you 80% of that result. We'll call that C time. These are leveraged activities we can do. For most people, this is their only distinction around time. In a professional practice, you might think of D time as non-billable work, and C time as billable work. But think about it, if 20% of what you do gives you 80% of the result, let's do a little bit of math here. What would 20% of the 20% give you? Wow, it would give you 80% of the 80%. I'll do the math for you here. That means this magic 4% sweet spot gives you 64% of the result. We call this B time. And then play it one more time through. If 20% of the 20% gives you 80% of the 80%, then 20% of the 20% of the 20% gives you 80% of the 80% of the 80%. And the math works out, there's that magic 1% that gives you half the result. We call that A time. And so in your business or your professional practice, you doing junk work is D activities, but you might think, hey, when I'm doing billable work at $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour, that's my A time. It's probably not. Probably it's C time for you. What could be more important? I know, Alan, you and I have worked on this a lot over the last 2 years, and maybe at the very end of this webinar, you might make a comment or two about that piece of it. But what we found for you is things like looking at how you staff down the work, and how you created a system in there to make sure the work gets done on time in a really excellent fashion, and ways that you can better serve clients. And that A and B level activities helped you increase profitability for the firm, where today you're probably, I don't know the exact number, but what, 30, 40% more profitable without working more hours. Okay, so now going back to, can you afford an assistant? Your assistant's going to allow you to have this week an hour or two handing him or her items for them to do 20, 30 hours of work. And so you handing your assistant items might be C time. It's absolutely worthwhile because it frees up 5 or 10 hours per week of your A and B activities, which will produce a 10x, 100x return on investment for doing that.
Thanks, David. I'll comment on that right now. I have made many mistakes in my career, but one of the biggest mistakes I've made is thinking that the time I spend doing client work and billing is the most important time, when I've been, quite frankly, too busy to think through important decisions, to question why we do certain things and why we don't do certain things, and to build relationships. How many times have I said, well, I can't go to that cocktail party, I can't go to John's birthday party, I don't have time to be friendly to my employees and to let them get to know me, I'm too busy doing hourly work, it's costing me $600 an hour to do these activities, I don't have time to think through whether we should send hard copies or emails, even though the staff tells me I'm behind the time. These are big mistakes, and David, I do thank you for helping me think through a lot of these decisions and seeing how important it is to be mission control and not only the astronaut walking on the moon.
Which brings me to the third must-have rule here, which is you do have enough for your assistant to do. Some of you think, well, gosh, what would I even ask them to do? Well, first of all, keep a running list of what is it that you could hand to your assistant. So over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, as things come up on your to-do list or you find yourself handling certain functions and you think, well, I could have handed this to an assistant, just keep a list of that and then gather those together into what we'll call recurring tasks, things that happen again and again. If it's a report that you pull each week or each month, or for example, an ongoing type of work, like for example, my assistant helps me schedule quite a bit. It's a recurring part of her role for Emily. Or is it a one-off task? A one-off task might be dealing with a return that you had on something you ordered, or it might be gathering something that you needed to get from your insurance agent that you need to get from them, a one-off task. And you can keep these lists of items here. And what you'll find is once you start getting comfortable that there are things you can hand to your assistant, there will never again be a shortage of things you can hand to him or her. You'll have so much to give to them. Now, the fourth must follow rule to leverage your assistant is you need to get very clear on who you need and on who you want. So first of all, Alan, when you see this, the screenshots here, the PDF tool, I'll bring up attention to people. For those of you that are going to get the Freedom Formula, I think you're really going to enjoy it. I'm going to actually drag over here my web browser for 1 second here. And so I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and get the Freedom Formula. You can get it on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. If you're in Alan's office, he'll hand you a copy probably. I've gotten so many cool books from Alan when I'm in there doing my client session and I see a book on his shelf. He says, oh, here, you got to read this. And he hands me a book by Srikumar Rao or a book by, oh, I forgot the guy, Alan, who wrote The Untethered Soul that you handed to me, which was a phenomenal book. But get a copy of the book. And then when you do that, register it at freedomtoolkit.com. And in there, you'll get a copy of all kinds of these PDF tools, plus you'll also get a video training series that comes with it that you and your staff can use that kind of walks through. So I'm just mentioning that to you. So the big thing here about having your assistant be in your style is, I mean, over the last 24 years, I've had probably 15 different assistants. If they're really good, I promote them to other roles in my company. If they're not very good, then they don't stay working for me. And if they're really good, sometimes they still decide a year or 2 or 3 into it that they want a different career for themselves or that they move. And so we recognize and understand that. And so what I've learned is I need my assistant who can operate in my style. Like I tend to be fairly introverted. So I don't want someone who's gonna be talkative around me. I want someone who's not gonna be upset that I'm not gonna be, having lots of connection conversations. And if they can't handle that without feeling, gosh, is David mad at me for that? Then they're the wrong person. And I've had assistants in the past who, were wondering, gosh, David, are you mad at me? You didn't say hello. You didn't ask me about my weekend. And what I've learned is I need to hire and set the right expectations with people for me. I know for me, I'm an auditory delegator. I can say it much faster and much clearer. I'm not going to type out my delegation item in an email. I know for me, I don't want them sharing information with me auditorily. I'd rather them type it down in an email or on a tool like Sana or some other project management tool so that I can see and read it because I can read it much faster. I love to delegate, which we'll talk about here in a moment, through an app where I can just give them a recording, and I want them to email me back when it's been completed or put it on their task manager program that we use. So who it is for you might be different. Maybe you love to text. I hate texting. Maybe you love to meet in person. I'm less involved with that. Why? Because I can hand off items very quickly via recordings on an app. Whereas if I have to meet with them in person, it takes longer, it goes slower. I don't love that. There's no right or wrong way. There's only right or wrong way for you. So make sure you're clear on who you are and who you need before you go to hire this person. I mentioned there about the freedomtoolkit.com to get a copy of the book. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Rule number 5, you have to make a part of your assistant's job right from the point of hire for them to, we call it UBSing, but for them to systematize the role of being a great assistant for you. So you're going to have your assistant and he or she's going to stay with you for a year, for 10 years, but at some point, if they're really good, you're going to promote them, or life's going to happen where they're going to, a spouse gets relocated and they decide to move on from the opportunity, or maybe they decide to retire. So part of your assistant's job has to be that he or she is going to systematize, to document how it is that they become a great assistant for you, so the next person starts off with that. This is a quick screen grab. I just did it here earlier today, and it's of the assistant UBS I have for my company, for me, for my assistant. And it talks in there about, company information, and it has things for me personally and how I want them to handle my email and calendar and my passwords and recurring credit card charges and travel. These are all things that I want my assistant to know how to do, and they include checklists and screenshots and training videos and templated things and documents that describe how to do this, so that the next assistant who comes in, if Emily were to be promoted, which I would love to promote her, she's just not quite ready to come further back into the workforce just yet, but someday she will. And someday I'll have to backfill her role. So when she's training that a new assistant, she's got all these things here, probably 10 or 15% of which she created or edited, and probably 70 to 80% prior assistants to her had created, that makes that much easier. So part of your assistant's role has to be documenting and systematizing how do you be a great assistant for you. For example, if I were Alan's assistant, what airlines does he like to travel on? Where does he like to sit? What types of hotel rooms? Like, for example, for me, my assistant knows, because it's written down in my travel preferences, that when I'm at a hotel, I very much like a quiet room. It needs to be away from the elevator, away from the vending machine slash ice makers if it's in that particular hotel. Those are things that matter to me. I want her always, when I'm traveling somewhere, to let me know where the nearest Trader Joe's or Whole Foods is, so I can buy some healthy food there so I can eat better on the road. I don't know what it is for you, but you're going to want to document that. When I say you, your assistant is, so that it's all there for the next person. Number 6, make however you delegate to your assistant, make it easy, make it convenient for you. Now, I'm an auditory delegator, so the way I use it, there's an app, and here's a screenshot of the app. The one I use is called Voxer, Voxer. It's right there at the very top. You can do the exact same thing on WhatsApp if you prefer to use that. I use WhatsApp with my wife, so I like having that one not be for work as well. You could do the opposite, but they're almost the same type of thing. But with Voxer, I hit that little orange button, that walkie-talkie button at the bottom, and I just start talking. And whatever I say, within 3 seconds, starts showing up on her phone. And I can see if she's listened to it, because it tells me. I can see if it's been played by her. And so you'll notice these delegations, 3 minutes here, a minute there, 35 seconds there. What it is I have a to-do that comes up in the day. I grab my phone, I simply hit one button, and I say, Emily, can you please double check to make sure that on that flight that they know that I need a gluten-free meal? Hey, Emily, and a different Voxer might be, could you check in with Teresa and make sure that we actually do have the meeting space arranged for this? It lets me delegate very quickly, and I like that. Now for you, you might want to do it differently. Maybe you like to text your assistant and just send her something that way. Or maybe you want to sit down with your assistant and so that the two of you meet. Whatever it is for you, make it easy. Now, if you do meet with your assistant in person, personally, I would have him record the meeting. Why? So that he can go back and listen to the recording a second time, so that he doesn't have to worry if he missed something. If he's still got questions, wonderful, he can come ask them of you, but have him ask them of you after he's listened to the recording a second time. Remember, from a dollar or economic standpoint, 1 hour of your time is worth more than 10 or 20 hours of your assistant's times, purely from a financial basis. I'm not saying anything about the quality of human being that they are. So for them taking a second listen through to catch the details for a meeting is a good idea. You can do the same thing if you meet with them over the phone as well. There's different apps for that as well. All right, number 7 says this: you have to have one list to rule them all. And Alan, I know you'll get a kick out of that, because for those of you that are J.R. Tolkien fans and Lord of the Rings, right? They said one ring to rule them all. Well, one list to rule them all. So when your assistant, you give her something that she needs to get done, you want her to put that item up on one list where you and she share. Now, there are different ways to do that. I once upon a time, 10 years ago, would use spreadsheet to manage that. But today's world, there are so many easy to-do list programs, task management programs that are out there. Probably the easiest one, if it's just you and your assistant, but no one else, personally, I would probably use Asana, Asana. It's a simple one. And you share an account with them. They have their account, you have your account, and it's actually free if there's just two of you and you don't need all the full features. So I can see if she's done it. I can see if she's got notes about it. It's all there in one place. And here's what you come to get a great comfort with. As long as everything is on that list and you can see it there, then you know nothing's going to get slipped between the cracks because you can see where it is on that list and you can see that it's been done or what the status is. One place gives you great visibility and it's just so easy to share it that way. Again, it used to be that you'd have to go through all kinds of contortions with spreadsheets. Today, a simple task management program. Now, if your company already uses a different one like Basecamp or Zoho Projects or Liquid Planner, then you might want to just go ahead and use that same one. Now, my company, we use a project management tool called Zoho Projects. We use that for the company, but because Emily often does stuff for me outside of the company, I have her using Asana so that only she and I have access to it. I feel more comfortable that way. It's up to you with what your comfort level is, but one place to do that, and it should not be that you're managing his or her to-dos via email inbox. That's the worst way to do that. You want to do it through an app of some sort. In an inbox, today's email gets washed away by tomorrow's email, and it's really hard to keep track of it. But please, one place where everything that they do goes in one place and you can check to see how it was done. And as long as you see it on the list, you can relax, you can close the mental bandwidth that would have been there to kind of see that it was done. It really makes your life better. All right, Alan, must follow rule number 8 is to use a password management program. And so this could be things like KeyPass or PassPack or oh gosh, LastPass, any of these strong password programs that you can use. And if you're not sure what to use, grab a copy or go to pcmagazine.com, right? That's a reputable site that does reviews for these things. So go to a reputable site and get a reputable recommendation about that. And here's the cool part about a password manager. Not only can you use it to hold passwords that you and your assistant share, things like, if you want her to be doing things like ordering stuff for you online and helping you with things on your Amazon account, or if you want her to help with making some posts to some of your social media or whatever it might be. By putting them in there, plus, for example, my assistant, I use different credit cards for different companies. I'll put my credit card information there so she has access to that when I give her permission to. And it's a much safer way to keep it than having her write Post-it notes everywhere. Personally, here's one caveat to that. You should never give your assistant access to key passwords for things like your bank account. Heaven forbid that. Come on, let's use a little bit of common sense, right? So I wouldn't even put that on the cloud personally. I don't think that that's a smart thing to do. But for things like perhaps maybe you're sharing access to your Dropbox folder, and maybe you want her to have access to your Microsoft Outlook account so that she can put stuff directly onto your calendar, or these are all things that could be reasonable. Rather than having it be sheets of paper, have really, really robust passwords, 12, 15, 20-digit or character passwords that are randomly done. But by using a password program, it's easy. You don't have to worry about remembering all of those things. Number 9 says, have them learn to manage your inbox. Look, some people say, I'm scared of having my assistant in my inbox. They might not do it the way I want to, or they might see something I don't want them to see. First of all, if you can't trust your assistant to have the maturity to understand that when he or she sees something in your inbox, that they're going to handle it appropriately and be confidential and have some maturity, you've hired the wrong assistant. I mean, that's an obvious one. But your goal is to have your assistant be able to take 30% or more of your inbox email and either delete it, process it, or handle it themselves. And so, for example, let's say you get an email that comes in from Paul, and your assistant can just go ahead and take care of it perhaps. Or maybe your assistant's going to put it into an appointment that you're going to have, so that you need to have it when you meet with Paul later on that week at 2 p.m. on the Thursday, it's right there in the appointment memo. Or maybe she's just going to realize there's nothing you need to take action on with this, and she's going to put it to a different folder called Assistant Handled, right? So for me, I use a feature inside of Microsoft Outlook. That's what I use for my email program. Some of you might use Google. Some of you might, not just be Gmail, maybe there's a different email program that you use, but they all have roughly the same functionality. So in Outlook, they have something called Quick Steps, and this is what my ribbon on my ribbon is. It shows some of the quick steps I've set up. So it says, for example, Assistant Do, or Assistant Talk with David, or Assistant Handle, or Assistant Add to the appointment. The reason I do this here is because over time, I can start to train my assistant by using these quick steps, which are set up to categorize an individual email so she sees what I want her to do with it. So for example, that email from Paul Donovan, if I want her to add that to an appointment I have with Paul later that week, and she hasn't done that when I see it in my inbox, I can click on the quick step for Assistant Add to Appointment, and it categorizes that email so that she now sees, oh, I should have put this in David's appointment with Paul later this week, and now I'm training her to learn how to do that. And so I also use an assistant handled subfolder. So any email that looks like I don't have to take immediate action on, any email that she's handled, she puts into an assistant handled folder. And so I know that she's looked at everything that's in there. So about once or twice a week, I do a quick scan through and see if she's missed anything or miscategorized anything, but I do it much less degree of vigilance and less frequently. And I'll put all those into my archive when I'm done with that. And I also want my assistant to go through my sent folder each day. Why? I want my assistant to know how I handle things, who I'm working with, what types of attention I pay to people so that she can start to handle things. She can see relative importance based on who I'm talking with and what I'm saying. If I send an email over to Kevin and the email says, Kevin, I'm trying to lock down a meeting for you and I on Thursday or next Tuesday, she can now follow up on that because she's seen it in my email. Sure, I could CC her on everything, but it's easier if she's just in my inbox. That's what I would prefer. You guys get to make your own determination, but however you do that, personally, having had assistants helping with email for close to 15 plus years, I think you're crazy if you don't have your assistant help and have access to your Outlook. I think that you're not getting the full power of your assistant. Which brings me to actually, I'm going to give you a bonus one here, Alan, in a moment here, my 11th rule. But my 10th must follow rule is that any kind of information that you need on a specific time or date, that information should not be left on a folder. It should be put inside your Outlook calendar appointment or your Google Calendar appointment as part of the memo. So for example, if I'm meeting with Ron and I'm meeting with him on the 24th at 11 a.m. like here, all that information, the recent emails from him, his contact information, um, for example, if I'm doing an interview and this were an interview I was being interviewed by a particular podcast or a syndicated writer for some magazine. My assistant would put information, put links to that person's social media, like LinkedIn account, would put information about David. This person writes for Forbes.com. Here's a link to the last 3 articles that she wrote. And so what happens is when I go to meet with Mary, or in this case, Ron, I can say, well, Ron, hey, I know you emailed me on the 19th and you said ... I I can be brilliant. And Ron's like, wow, what a memory. But all it is I've been spoon fed the information by my assistant and she's filed it directly in the appointment memo. It's like the same thing if I were meeting in person with somebody. I would want my assistant to hand me a folder that had all the relevant information right as I was walking into that meeting so that I wouldn't have to go looking for it. Your assistant can make you look brilliant. Which brings me to my very final must follow rule. Please, and Alan, I know you and I have had conversation about this, right? We've seen it with your clients sometimes might have done this, or I've seen it with my clients have done it. I've done it by mistake myself, which is don't hire drama, especially not in the role of your assistant. Maybe you put up with it in a different role if you do, but not in this role. You're going to spend, this person is kind of like your number one person that you spend the most time with probably interacting with in your company. Make this person someone that's not a drama laden person. Some people, unfortunately, I'm not putting a judgment to it, they're just drama magnets, and you want to avoid those people in the role of your assistant. So again, as I mentioned before, I really encourage you to get to freedomtoolkit.com, get a copy of the Freedom Formula. I think you're going to really enjoy that. And then, Alan, I wanted to make one more mention. I know you're going to be there for the Breakthrough Company workshop that we're teaching in Irvine, California on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And so right here is the URL for people to find out more, mauimastermind.com/growth. And the reason I want you to take a look at that is if you are a client of Alan's, and if you have a business that is, really in the stage that you're scaling it in earnest, you'll probably have at least $1 million plus in revenue. This is a company that you're at a point where you're trying to grow it so you can have either more freedom for yourself or maybe even to one day sell it 2, 5, 10 years down the road. Follow up with Alan. We might have extra tickets for the event for you to be our guest at the event. And I'll let you follow up with Alan's office about that part. But I just want to call attention. I think you're really going to enjoy that workshop. And specifically, what are we talking about there? What are the characteristics or elements of a rapidly growing company for a company to break through to the next level? And so it'll be your planning for the entire year. You'll create your your multi-year plan, your 1-year plan, your quarterly plan, and some of these new tools that we've developed for how you can raise the accountability bar inside your company. I think you'll find will really be fantastic. So those are just 2 quick resources for people, the Freedom Formula book and then the Breakthrough Company. And I want to say, really appreciate you having me on here today. I know that everyone's got to get back into their work day and so forth, but please follow up for anyone that we can help in some way. And Alan, thank you for having me on here as a guest. I really enjoy always coming in to talk with your clients about whether it be about scaling a company or in this case, how to leverage an assistant just to make your life better. So thank you, Alan.
David, thank you very much. That was another outstanding presentation. If anyone is interested in going to one of David's seminars or conferences, let me know and we can see if you're a good fit for his organization. Most people are, and they just do incredible things. Please again join us on the 16th for the life insurance and premium financing webinar. January 23rd for the installment sale to a defective grantor trust. January 30 for the biggest mistakes physicians make. And also February 6th, February 13, February 20, and we'll be filling in other dates in the not too distant future. Thanks again for attending, and may the rest of your day be billable. Or hopefully you're making A decisions even instead of that. Thank you.